Welcome to Part 5. This completes our documentary series, guys, and I am keeping my fingers crossed that all of these deep informational dives will at least make you scratch your head once or twice. Okay, now on to health, medicine, and pharma. War, conflict, and global events. Medicine presents itself as sanctuary, white walls, sterile instruments, calm voices, charts, and protocols designed to reassure. From the outside, it appears guided solely by compassion and evidence. Yet beneath that surface runs an uncomfortable question, one rarely spoken aloud, but widely felt. What happens when healing becomes a marketplace? In our world, illness is not only a biological event, it is an economic one. Treatments arrive with price tags that dwarf lifetimes of savings. Patents determine access. Insurance decides worthiness. A diagnosis becomes a negotiation, not just with the body, but with institutions whose priorities are quietly financial. The contradiction is subtle but corrosive. A system built to preserve life must also justify revenue growth. When cures threaten long-term profitability, people notice when they stall, disappear, or are endlessly described as promising but not viable. Officially, innovation is expensive. Research takes time. Failures are common. These explanations are often true, and yet patterns emerge that unsettle patients and practitioners alike. Treatments that manage conditions are funded endlessly. Therapies that might resolve them struggle to advance. Medications are reformulated, rebranded. Prices rise without clear justification. The result is a lingering suspicion that chronic illness is more sustainable than resolution. No memo confirms this. No executive admits it. But the incentives speak quietly and consistently. Beyond approved protocols exist therapies spoken of in whispers. Some are unproven. Some are ineffective. Some are dangerous. Others, however, are simply unprofitable, difficult to patent, easy to replicate, or incompatible with existing business models. These approaches are dismissed quickly, sometimes without thorough examination. Studies fail to receive funding. Trials never progress. Advocates are labeled irresponsible, even when their claims are modest. The line between protecting patients and protecting markets becomes difficult to trace. Vaccines, among the most powerful tools ever developed, sit at the center of this tension. They represent collective protection medicine, not just for the individual, but for society. Yet their distribution is tied to the same corporate and regulatory structures that govern everything else. For many, trust is absolute. For others, it is conditional. When companies with histories of misconduct are also tasked with public health, skepticism grows not necessarily toward the science, but toward the stewards of it. Questions arise, not always rational, not always informed, but persistent. Attempts to silence these questions often deepen them. Science depends on funding. Increasingly, that funding comes from the very industries under investigation. Studies are sponsored. Data ownership is negotiated. Unfavorable results are delayed, reframed, or quietly shelved. None of this requires conspiracy-only contracts. Most researchers enter the field to help people. Many are honest. Some are constrained. The public sees peer-reviewed certainty, but rarely the negotiations behind it. Agencies meant to protect patients are staffed by the experts, many of whom previously worked for, or will later join, the companies they regulate. This is explained as experience, efficiency, realism. Yet over time enforcement softens. Penalties become fines. Violations are settled without admission of wrongdoing. Products remain on the market. Trust erodes slowly, invisibly. The watchdog begins to resemble a consultant. The deepest unease does not come from any single scandal but from accumulation. A lawsuit here, a recall there, a whistleblower silenced, a drug approved too quickly, another withdrawn too late. Each incident is survivable on its own. Together, they create a fog where patients no longer know who to believe. And in that fog, fear fills the gaps left by silence. Most medicine still works. Most doctors still care. Most treatments still save lives. But the system has entangled healing with profit so tightly that trust itself has become fragile. People do not reject medicine because they hate science. They reject it because they no longer know whose interests science serves. And in matters of health, doubt is contagious. War, conflict, and global events. Violence is policy. Stability is narrative. Wars are rarely sold for what they are. They are framed as necessity, defense, liberation, deterrence, or humanitarian obligation. The language is moral long before it is strategic. Threats are emphasized. Timelines are compressed. Complexity is simplified until action feels unavoidable. Only later, sometimes decades later, do the justifications quietly change. Modern warfare is not an anomaly in the global system. It is an industry embedded within it. Defense contracts span generations. Weapons platforms are designed not only to function, but to require continuous maintenance, upgrades, and replacement. Conflicts ending too cleanly threaten supply chains, budgets, and institutional relevance. This does not require wars to be started for profit only. That profit ensures they are rarely resolved decisively. Peace is unstable for organizations built around readiness. Beneath ideological language, material interests often remain consistent. Oil, gas, minerals, shipping routes, water access, rare earth elements. These resources shape strategic priorities, regardless of public messaging. Interventions cluster geographically around regions rich in value and poor in leverage. Official explanations emphasize values, operational realities emphasize access. The disconnect is not always hidden, but it is rarely foregrounded. Some conflicts begin with claims later proven exaggerated, incomplete, or false. Weapons programs overstated. Intelligence politicized. Worst-case scenarios presented as imminent certainty. These are not always fabrications. Often they are interpretations chosen because they justify action. When corrections emerge, the war is already underway. Accountability diffuses. Reports are written. Lessons are learned. Institutions continue largely unchanged. Direct confrontation between powerful states is risky, so conflicts are displaced. Funding, weapons, intelligence, and training flow into regional struggles where local populations absorb the cost. Allegiances shift, malicious profit. Civilian suffering becomes collateral to strategic competition. Officially, no war exists between the sponsors. In practice, the battlefield tells a different story. Weapons do not create conflict, but they accelerate it. The global arms trade thrives in instability. Regions flooded with weapons rarely de-escalate quickly. Post-conflict zones remain volatile long after headlines fade. Arms manufacturers operate legally, transparently, and profitably, often selling to opposing sides across different conflicts. The market does not require moral alignment, only demand. Human rights rhetoric is inconsistently applied. Some atrocities provoke intervention. Others are ignored. The difference often lies not in severity, but in strategic alignment. Moral outrage becomes selective, undermining its credibility. This inconsistency does not negate the real suffering, it politicizes it. And populations. Notice society, psychology, and population behavior shaped. Division normalized. Agency redirected. Control does not require force when perception can be managed. Modern societies are shaped less through decree than through incentives, narratives, and emotional triggers. People are rarely told what to think, but they are guided toward what to argue about. Social engineering does not require a master plan. It emerges from advertising psychology, political messaging, media incentives, and algorithmic amplification. Messages that provoke fear, outrage, or tribal loyalty spread more efficiently than nuance. Over time, populations internalize conflict as identity. Race, class, ideology, culture. These divisions often reflect real grievances. But when amplified disproportionately, they redirect anger horizontally instead of vertically. Groups fight each other over symbols while systemic issues remain structurally untouched. Polarization becomes self-sustaining. A divided population is easier to predict and harder to unify. Education systems face competing pressures: standardization, efficiency, economic utility. Critical thinking is praised rhetorically, but often constrained in practice. Memorization is easier to measure than skepticism. Compliance is rewarded more consistently than questioning. This does not produce ignorance, it produces specialization without context. People learn how to function, not why systems exist as they do. Claims of cultural decline surface in every era. What distinguishes the modern version is speed. Norms shift rapidly. Traditions dissolve faster than replacements form. Meaning becomes individualized, unstable. This creates freedom but also disorientation. Populations searching for coherence become vulnerable to absolutist narratives. Population control is rarely discussed explicitly. Instead, it appears as debates over economics, sustainability, healthcare access, urban planning, and demographics. Decisions affecting birth rates, migration, and longevity are framed as technical necessities. Intent is difficult to prove, impact is not. The term conspiracy theory originally described specific patterns of thought. Over time, it became a rhetorical weapon. Legitimate criticism is sometimes dismissed reflexively by association with fringe claims. This protects institutions but also fuels resentment when real scandals later confirm partial truths. Each exposure widens the credibility gap. History provides ample reasons for skepticism. Covert programs exposed years later. Corporate misconduct revealed through litigation. Surveillance disclosed after denial. Conflicts justified with flawed intelligence. These events do not prove every claim, but they establish precedent. Once trust fractures, people tend to extrapolate. In an environment saturated with misinformation, discernment becomes exhausting. People oscillate between blind trust and total disbelief. Nuanced collapses. Everything becomes either propaganda or revelation. The absence of shared reality becomes its own crisis. Modern influence operations do not require secret agencies alone. They emerge from media competition for attention, political campaigning, algorithmic incentives, and economic pressure on journalism. The effect is similar to classic psychological operations: confusion, demoralization, fragmentation even, without centralized coordination. Trust erodes gradually. Then, institutions once seen as neutral become perceived as partisan. Expertise is questioned. Authority loses legitimacy. This does not automatically produce revolution. More often, it produces disengagement. People withdraw, adapt privately, and stop believing that systems can be meaningfully changed. So here is my closing assessment. The world described here does not require secret masters. It has created misaligned incentives, concentrated power, fragmented accountability, information overload, and populations trained to argue rather than organize. The danger is not that everything is controlled, but that enough is distorted to make truth feel inaccessible. And when people can no longer tell whether they're being lied to, they stop listening altogether. Thank you everyone for following along. It means so much to me. I love you all. We are all brothers and sisters. We are powerful, and we can make the change.